Hello, my name is Kristine Robak, and I've been working in the energy industry for 30 years, and I've been selling electricity for 22 of those years. I'm going to try to keep this to Energy Purchasing 101, your choices for purchasing, electric supply, best practices, and tips. So let's get started. First, let's go over a few fundamentals. Why electric choice? Legislation was passed in the 90s to separate and create deregulation. It required utilities to divest themselves of the generation piece, and it created the Public Utility Commission, or the PUC. So there are still some aspects that are regulated, and those are the poles and wires, but you do have a choice for your electric supply. Let's take a look at a map. Not all states are deregulated. Only the states in blue are deregulated, where you have a choice to shop for your power. The states in gray are all still regulated, and you have to purchase from your utility. You do not have a choice. And the states in green are a bit complicated. There are some limited opportunities to purchase your electricity. You may be asking yourself, who's managing all this? Let's talk about the regions. Independent System Operators, or ISOs, manage the amount of electricity on the grid. They're telling the generators to turn on or off and managing the supply and the demand and matching that up. In New England, it's all grouped together into the ISO New England. In the Mid-Atlantic, it's all grouped together in PJM. New York and Texas are their own ISOs. In Texas, it's called ERCOT. Now that we've talked about the various players, let's get right into buying electricity. There are actually 15 to 25 various components that make up the generation cost, and some are extremely small. But let's break it into categories. The base of the pyramid is actually the largest, which is energy. And then the next piece of the pyramid is capacity, which you can think of as your account's contribution to the system peak. And then in some markets, there's transmission costs. And then at the very top of the pyramid are ancillaries. So energy is still the largest portion, and it's the most volatile. I've heard it described as the most volatile sector in the world, but that might have been before cryptocurrency. So when comparing the components, it's very important to understand your company's risk tolerance and the importance of budget certainty on your price per kWh. For your energy portion, you can actually fix or float it or do a combination of both of those. So by fixing your energy, you can fix it for certain seasons, certain periods of time. You can float it on an index hourly market, or there are products where you could do a blend of each, where you can layer in your energy purchases, which has become extremely popular in the last 10 years. Or there may be times when you want to float it on the index market during certain periods and fix it for other periods of time. And that might be something that you want to do if you want to take advantage of future low market opportunities, or you're unsure of how you're going to be using electricity in the future. So let's talk about risk and reward on the spectrum. It's important for you to understand how much budget certainty your facility needs. Whether you have to fix your budget for a year and have to be within that price, or if you're able to take a little more risk and reduce those risk premiums. So if you're a grocery store or a university, you may want to fix all your components. But if you're an industrial site, you may want to float through certain components and take on a little more risk. When shopping for your electricity, be mindful of your future volume. Are you going to be adding sites, closing sites, operational changes, efficiency projects? You can negotiate larger volume tolerance bands and the ability to add and delete locations, but just understand there'll be risk premiums associated with those. Let's move back to the components pyramid. Okay, the pyramid on the left has a circle around all the components. So that is truly known as a fixed price. And the pyramid on the right shows that you can fix certain portions of the pyramid. Okay, ENGIE has different delivery points. There's the hub, which is the liquid point where wholesale and trading is done. There's the zone, which is the delivery area or the area where it's consumed. And there's shape, which is your monthly forecasted usage for peak and on-peak consumption. There's straddle, which is the volume tolerance band that is assigned to your shape or consumption. There's imbalance, which covers the hourly consumption changes versus what was projected for your site. And there are line losses, which are assigned to cover inefficiencies in transmission and distribution lines. Typically, you can set your energy to the hub, the zone, or right to the meter, and the latter being the most popular. Let's talk about what drives electricity prices. There's nuclear, there's renewables, there's coal, but still the main driver in this country is really natural gas. And this graph shows the most liquid point of natural gas, which is the Henry Hub, located in Louisiana. This really drives the electric prices. And this graph shows over a period of time the volatility in the gas price. So when buying electricity, it's very important to keep a very close eye on natural gas prices. So earlier we went over what the various markets are, the various ISOs or independent system operators. So let's take a look at this graph. It shows the various ISOs and the 12-month forward rolling average. And you can see the volatility on this graph. There's about an $80 spread per megawatt hour. And remember, a megawatt hour is 1,000 kilowatt hours. So the $80 megawatt hour price difference is really 8 cents per kilowatt hour. So this is showing the volatility and the timing in the market. So let's talk about timing. Watch the natural gas market, and when prices are low, because of the correlation to electricity, lock in your electricity prices and perhaps go as long as you can at those low prices. Let's go back to the pyramid. Let's talk about ancillaries. Think of ancillaries as the components to get the electricity to your meter. Within the ancillary market is something called Renewable Portfolio Standards, or RPS. Think of that as the green fuel mix that's set by the state in your supply costs. Another component of ancillaries is line losses. Let's talk a little more about those. This is where I see a lot of customers get tripped up. You can either fix the line losses or pass them through. It's very important to understand how they're being treated. If one supplier is passing them through and grossing up your volumes, that's not apples to apples from fixing your line losses and including them in that fixed price. So it's very important to understand how they're being handled because one supplier may look like the low price but be passing through the line losses, and another may be including it. So it's important to ask questions and understand how they're being handled. Let's talk about capacity. It's probably the trickiest for customers to understand, and that is totally understandable. Let's go through the formula so you understand how this works. Your system peak is called a capacity tag, or your kW peak, which is multiplied by the zonal scaling factor, or also known as the utility location, multiplied by the forecast pool requirement times the auction clearing price for capacity for that planning year, multiplied by the meter read days in a cycle. Got it? Okay, let's break this down of why that's important. Capacity is important because in New England and New York, it's set only one time a year for that capacity tag. So how your system performs on that one period of time, which typically the system peak is in July or August on a very hot afternoon, you're going to be paying that capacity rate for the whole following year for the capacity term cycle, which is June through May. So every invoice will have that capacity tag multiplied by that formula. So it's very important to understand how your system performs on that period. Now, there are signups that you can do with various companies to alert you to those system peak days so that you can try to mitigate your capacity tag. Transmission is in the PJM region, which again, remember, is the Mid-Atlantic region. It's the cost for moving high voltage electricity from the generation facilities to the distribution lines, or also known as the grid. There's also a component called Transmission Enhancement Charges, or TEC. And these are the costs for new projects or upgrades to the transmission system. You can either fix transmission or transmission enhancement charges, or you can float them or pass them through, or you can have them adjusted yearly. And because these costs are unknown, we highly recommend that you have these just adjusted yearly since they're unknown. Remember earlier we talked about RPS, or Renewable Portfolio Standards? Let's talk about why it's important to understand that piece. I see a lot of new buyers get very tripped up on what's included and what isn't included in their price for RPS. RPS, remember, is the green portion or the fuel mix that's required, and it's set by the state. This is increasing almost every year in most states, and they also have breakout requirements for particular fuel mixes of solar, wind, to promote different renewables. It's important to understand how new laws and new legislation is being treated in your price. Understand which laws are set, what the requirement is, and how it's being treated in your price if it's passed through, if there are change in law adjustments that will be made, so that when you're shopping, you're looking at apples to apples. We've spoken about RPS, Renewable Portfolio Standards. These are laws set by the state to green up the fuel mix. There are lots of layers and lots of future legislation. There are laws that have passed that start in the future. When you're buying your electricity, you want to be mindful of what's included and what isn't included, and what the supplier's plan is to pass through future legislation. Ask questions, make sure you understand all those components for each state, because they really vary from $2 a megawatt hour to $25 a megawatt hour. So it's very important to understand the various requirements. Let's talk about a few best practices when purchasing electricity. The devil is in the details. Do not ask for pricing, make a selection, and then request a contract. I've seen this so many times, especially with auctions. A buyer will go out to bid, they'll select the low price, and then they'll ask the winning bidder to give them a contract. Carefully review a draft agreement prior to any executable pricing. This allows you to make sure you're comparing apples to apples and what's being included, what components, what future RPS laws, and really understand what's in that price when comparing prices from various suppliers. We've gone over a lot of different terminology for Energy Buying 101, and as you can see, it's somewhat complicated. The best advice is to have a checklist. Understand what's in your price. Understand your operational changes, your usage restrictions, how capacity and transmission are being handled, line losses are being treated, future RPS laws, and payment terms. Read the contract when comparing pricing. The best advice I can give you is to keep asking questions and understand what's in the price. Thank you for your time. Again, my name is Kristine Robak. It was a pleasure sharing this with you, and good luck.